Hello and welcome to the President's Podcast right here on the record with the Ohio Senate. The views the news excludes. I'm John Fortney, the Director of Communication with the Senate Republican Caucus, the Majority Caucus in the Ohio Senate. And it is great to have on the President's Podcast Senator Tom Patton, who is a Republican from the 24th District in Cuyahoga County, and that's Strongsville. But he's also been around the General Assembly for how many years?
23
years.
Yes, sir.
Second longest serving right now in the General Assembly next to Representative Scott Olsleger. Before we get into it, I want to briefly read your biography that is part of the ohiosenate.gov page. You can go over to the member section and find each member of the Ohio Senate and read their biography. Here's the top part of it, and this is really, I think, sets the scene for who Tom Patton is. A lifelong resident of Cuyahoga County, Senator Tom Patton grew up as one of 9 kids on the near west side of Cleveland, the son of a Cleveland police officer and the father of a Cleveland Heights police officer who tragically died in the line of duty. Patton has taken up many legislative initiatives pertaining to police, firefighters, and first responders. Senator Patton has over 2 decades of experience in the Ohio General Assembly, and through his legislative responsibilities in Columbus, have grown over the years. Community and family come first for Tom Patton. I think Tom Patton is a Cuyahoga County son, is he not?
I always joke that it takes me 2 hours to get from my house to the State House, but it only takes me an hour and 45 minutes to get home. Not really, but I always feel at home in Cuyahoga County.
Well, you're somebody who could have gone and done anything, really. What's kept you in Northeast Ohio?
Family. I always joke that my brothers and sisters all still live in the western communities of Cuyahoga County. And with a family of 9 kids, you think, well, somebody's going to get job transfers, somebody's going to go here or there. And I always joke we're all still around. And so I always say it's because we're afraid if one of us goes, the rest will talk about us. But in addition, those 9 kids that my mom and dad had, we gave them 36 grandchildren. That's 3 dozen. If they were still alive, they're up to 66 great-grandkids. 10 of those grandkids are mine. And I'm real proud about that. I had 6 children. I used to joke they're all boys except 5. And that's how we brag about the 5 daughters. And but now the grandkids, 6 of the 10 grandkids are boys, so the boys are making a comeback. But my girls are special,
Oh, sure. And you've done so much for police and firefighters, and I want to give you the opportunity to talk a little bit about your son.
Tommy was, at first of all, he was third. A lot of people said you kept going till you had your son. I said, no, I had him third, but it took me 6 times to get those 5 girls, if that was the plan. But no, he was... We lost Tommy's mom, my wife, when Tommy's 3.5, and my mom and dad were so helpful to me. My sister Sheila and a few others, but because, as they say, the baby was 26 months old at the time of her death. Tommy was 3.5. They found a lump in her hip near the end of her pregnancy with Megan, and they didn't think it was serious until after the baby was born. Then it was indeed serious. And so, because of the fact my mom and dad were spending so much time, my mom kind of pretty much took care of the girls, and my father said, come on, little buddy, let's go with me. And they went everywhere together. They became remarkably close. And Tommy actually spent a year out at Holy Name High School at Borromeo Seminary. It kind of surprised me because I know he had a close relationship with some of his girlfriends, but he said, no, I think I'm supposed to go find out I'm supposed to be a priest. And then at the end of the year, he said, my faith is even stronger. He goes, but now I want to be a policeman like Grandpa. And Uncle Timmy, my brother, his godfather, and his cousins. I joked he thought it was the family business, but he was a very good policeman. He was a very fair policeman. The guys in the job liked him. The people in the community liked him. He was fair. And that's all you ever want a policeman to be when they're calling balls and strikes. And I was touched at his funeral. The one whole half of this very large St. Coleman church was filled with police officers. And there's another 300 policemen outside that couldn't get in. It's this very big church, packed. And I remember never being able to get up and speak at my mother's or father's funeral. But the night before, I said, this is the last chance I have. So the priest got up to end the Mass, and I stood up, so he sat back down. I just went up to the altar, and I just made a few comments on behalf of Tommy's sisters and I. We want to say thanks to everybody for the outpouring. And while I only had one son, as I look across the aisle, I see that Tommy had a lot of brothers. And truly, they are the family of blue. And so, I mean, I was very pro-police, obviously in fire and first responder before we lost Tommy. But, it's just something that, if the FOP or the firefighters have an issue, they know I'm going to lend, a supplicant ear. We'll see what they have to say and see if it makes sense. The firefighter cancer presumptive, Betsy Kling, they Channel 3, the meteorologist, her father. I didn't know he was walking through two banker's boxes. He says, hey, you got a couple minutes to talk about firemen and cancer? And I was in the Senate the last time. And I said, well, sure, come on in. So 2 hours later, I said, all right, we'll do the firefighter cancer presumptive bill. And
and that was during the 131st General Assembly. And basically that helped provide coverage or made it part of the BWC application if you had cancer as a firefighter, because, hey, look, it wasn't all that long ago that if you entered a building as a firefighter to knock down any type of fire, there was probably asbestos in that building.
Well, not just asbestos, but all, the fact remains, at the time we did the bill, 64% of firefighters got cancer, and there was 12 specific cancers out of 47 different cancers that they're more likely to get. Esophageal cancer, a glioblastoma, bladder cancer, which they're like 18 times more likely to get than the average male their same age or female. There are separate cancers that they would fight. And it actually took us 5 General Assemblies to get that bill done, because the municipal league and the city said, well, we're going to be responsible. But, and these young men and women that become firemen, they know about the 64%. They're going to roll to this. I'm going to be the lucky 36% that doesn't get it. But that's how dedicated they are to being of service-oriented, service mission. And so I was delighted that we got the bill passed. And we actually named it after the one firefighter, Captain Mike Palumbo. And here's a tragic story. He was testifying. He had 5 children. His mother and father were there. His wife was there. And his brother, who was also a fireman, were there. And on the day that we finally got it passed. And he died like 6 weeks later. And but he was as weak as he would still come down and testify. And as I tell people, there's firemen that haven't been born yet that will be able to take advantage of that Michael Palumbo Act that we were able to get done. And I think that's only fair. They're running into buildings to save us. We should do whatever we can when the roles are reversed, try to help save them.
Yeah, you're protecting and serving those who protect and serve every day, 24/7,
yes,
whether
sir.
You're at the fire station or you're on the police beat. One of the things, too, about protecting and serving, recently Senate Bill 159 is one of your bills, and talking about protecting and serving the public. This was really built and addressed a case out of Cuyahoga County, and it deals with competency standards for defendants. And your floor speech was really remarkable and quite authoritative and passionate about why this was so important, not just for those law enforcement officers out there or for the legal system, but for just Joe Average, who's going to the grocery store every day.
Now, is exactly right. I was contacted by our county prosecutor, Michael Malley, and he explained a situation where the gentleman that killed Officer Jameson Ritter, and he was judged to be, we want to send you out for a year of treatment and maintain your level of competency to come back and stand trial. The same gentleman had done this once before where he refused to take his medication, thus he didn't get the improvement they were hoping for. He was doing it again, and the doctors, the state doctors that were treating him weren't reporting it to anybody. And so, as I said on that floor speech that day, if this guy at the end of the year is not judge competent to stand trial, he's released. And here's a guy that didn't hesitate to shoot and kill an armed, trained police officer. So the average person on the street, what chance do you have a guy like that? And that's why it's important So we made it to the point where the doctors have to treat, and if the patient refuses the treatment, they have to contact the prosecutor and then the judge so they can extend the level of, or extension of the competency, because we're not going to let them out. We're just not going to let them go. We're going to keep them there, keep asking them, really, how do you force people to take medication? I'm not sure. I'm not a doctor. And that's not part of it. We did extend it from 1 year to a 5-year term. And so at some point along the way, the guy's going to be competent, and then we'll let the justice system take its course.
Well, even more relevant in a more dangerous world when you think about the revolving door of defendants who don't even post bail anymore. And in the national stories that we've seen, from the young lady who was murdered by somebody who had been in and out of jail for serious crimes, and she was murdered, on a mass transit system in North Carolina. And you wonder how that even is possible, but it's something your bill addresses.
It does, and it's come to the point, sadly, that we hear these stories so often on the nightly news or local news, and we've almost become so accustomed to it, it doesn't shock us as it should. And the same thing with mass shooters. We just get, another one. But the one thing, I always believe in giving somebody a second chance. Everybody in life should get a second chance. But like you said, the revolving door, when they're in, they're out, they're in, they're out. By the time they're 23, they've already been arrested and charged. And granted, it's the cost of prisons. It's about 9% of the state operating dollar. Higher ed is 11. So I always said, what happens when we become that state that spends more on prisons than we do higher ed? But on the other hand, we just can't let these bad people, walk the streets. And then, right now in downtown Cleveland, I would think a lot of people would hesitate, to go to an event after dark when they have to get to their car after dark. I mean, at a Cavs game in this big parking garage or something, but going downtown to a restaurant.
But you have to have your eyes wide open. I mean, you have to be looking ahead and behind you. I mean, it's Christmas shopping season as well. It doesn't matter whether it's Cleveland or Columbus or what. You have to always be mindful of your surroundings.
You certainly should be. Absolutely, yeah.
What's been the biggest issue so far for your constituents this year?
Right now, we hear, since actually last year, in the summer when the tax bills went out, there was a significant increase in tax bills. And I was a little concerned because Cuyahoga County, because most people don't know that the state pays like 10% of everybody's property taxes.
Yeah, soon to be 15.3%, I think, for the residential rollback, part of the reforms that were passed.
Yes, sir. And but one of the things then that the county auditor is supposed to do is let the state auditor know this is what our projection is at the 6th year. And Cuyahoga County didn't do that. They said they ran out of time. Well, they had 6 years to do it. But anyway, they came up with like a $35 million increase. And when someone approached them at a county council meeting and said, can you at least cut it in half the first year so we can get used to the higher amount, much higher amount? And they said, well, no, we're $35 million short in the budget. We need the entire thing, which led one WAG to actually comment, is that how they determined the $35 million? We're this much short, so we have to raise property tax that much. I'm not saying that's what happened, but it certainly gives someone pause because it was such a significant increase. And when you look at taxes, we have, sales tax, you have income tax, you have federal tax, it's property taxes. There's just taxes, and it's a complex system, and it's. There's folks out there says, let's just do away with the property tax, and I was at an event and they wanted me to sign it. And I asked the guy, I said, I'd be happy to sign it, but you first tell me where we're going to come up with $22 billion to replace the property tax in the state of Ohio.
If you're going to blow up the system, at least come out there and say, well, we think here's a better way. I don't know if you've seen it, but one of the sound bites or one of the pieces of interview that we post on social media from the podcast was recently with President McCauley. And he laid the whole thing out. Like, the state collects $30 billion a year, approximately, in general revenue fund. That's about $10 billion in income tax, about $16 billion in sales tax, and miscellaneous $4 billion. But we don't collect, as a state, $22 billion. That's all local money. And there is no way the General Assembly could fill that hole. Oh, wait, but what about the all funds part of the budget? What about all the federal funds that come in? Those are already spoken for. So it would be a massive $22 billion punch in the face. Would you agree with this? Don't you think that that would jeopardize police and fire services, big and small cities, libraries?
Metro parks, sure.
Metro parks. I mean, they would go from here's our budget to nothing.
Right. I tell people, you value your property, you don't want to pay property tax, but then if your property is on fire, and you go to call the fire department, there is none. And if somebody's crawling in your back window, burglarizing your house, again, there's the same house, you don't want to pay property tax. I mean, every time I have to write my property tax bill twice a year, it doesn't feel good, but it's necessary. And I saw my increase go up, and I understand that you pay your bills and you pay your taxes, but you got to take a look at what those taxes provide. And it's easy to say, well, the state can come up with it. That's what one of the leaders of this movement is saying. The state will come up with it. We're not Washington. We don't have that printing machine that prints money.
And we have to have a balanced budget
every single year. We've got to balance the penny. I always joke that, not joke, but mention that we have a little thing called budget correction bills. Those are for the years that we don't quite hit the numbers that we hope to hit, and then we have to cut some stuff between now and June 30th so that we end on the right spot. We can end $10 over. So, and we're proud of the fact that we monitor and keep it so close, and we still maintain the money in the rainy day fund for that year that's going to come, where some of the essential services are going to be required, because people always want to point to 3.7. But I said, but how is that going to affect?
It's not the budget slush fund to bail out programs and special interests and or even local. It's not for the local governments.
No,
it's called the Budget Stabilization Fund. A lot of people call it the Rainy Day Fund, but it's called the BSF, the Budget Stabilization Fund, to stabilize the state biennial budget.
That's it, exactly. And I think we've been good stewards, being sure, because I remember when we had about 80 cents in it.
Yeah, in 2006 or 2005.
And a former Senate colleague of mine, Brian Pereira, wrote a check for 80 cents to make sure he could see. He doubled that. It was more of a, but it was more, not to be funny, but he just wanted to emphasize just how bad the fiscal situation was in the state of Ohio. And to go from that 80 cents in a fund, in a stabilization fund, to get up to $3.8 billion has shown a lot of good fiscal restraint, and not just spending money like drunken sailors, and being able to take the money that we need to make sure there will be peaks and valleys. It just happens everywhere, and we want to make sure that we're prepared for the tsunami that might hit.
You have a couple additional bills that are under consideration right now, Senate Bill 81 and Senate Bill 92. One of them would freeze property taxes for people 65 and over that make $70,000 or less a year. And another would freeze property taxes for totally disabled veterans and their widow or widows. Important to try to really focus on the groups that would have the most problem paying property taxes.
We'll start with the seniors, because I've tried this back in 2005. I read an article the Cleveland Clinic published that said an elderly couple that are forced to move from the house that raised their families in because they can no longer afford to live there. They had to move into a smaller apartment, maybe senior living, maybe some HUD housing of some kind. They said you can guarantee in 6 months, one or both, we're going to have a significant medical incident, heart attack, stroke, nervous breakdown, whatever it was. And it struck me. I said, this was the greatest generation. Tom Brokaw wrote the book. And so I said, why are we doing this to the seniors? Because they're not going to the same church. They're not shopping at the same store. The wife isn't playing canasta with the ladies in the neighborhood. The husband isn't going to the local VFW to have his beer on Friday night. They're living somewhere else. So you can imagine.
It's not home.
That's it. That sums it all up. So I thought, and at that point, it was just, let's freeze it. Not eliminate the taxes. Just don't let, and when it goes to pass levies, and levies are difficult to pass, But one of the things that the seniors almost have to do, they have to vote no, because they're already at that stretch point. I've talked to grocery clerks that said the day before the Social Security check, they have seniors that are saying, do you have 2 day-old bread and can I have 3 slices of bologna thin? I mean, this is not the America that I want to live in. You know, I want to make sure we take care of those people that kind of had plowed the road ahead of us. And so I still believe that that bill is pertinent, and I hope that we have some success with that bill going forward. But as far as the military, and we have, obviously, fortunately, a finite number of disabled, service folks living in Ohio. I'd like to make Ohio a state that a lot of disabled folks like to live in because we treat our disabled people better. And one of the things I'd like to do is not allow them to have to pay income tax. But even if it's as important as that, I was at an American Legion event, not this last summer, the summer before. There was 19 disabled folks. There was 19 sets of wheelchairs. And in addition to 19 disabled veterans, there was 19 spouses, 18 husbands, 18 wives and 1 husband. And I was looking at 2 sets of heroes because the vows say better or worse. This usually falls into worse. And a lot of times people say, this is what I signed up for. But these 19 disabled veterans had their spouses with them at this event. And it struck me that these folks, for the most part, will spend the rest of as much of their adult life as hopefully possible taking care of their disabled veteran. And most of them will, given their medical issues, will have to probably bury them. Then they're left at 58, 60, 62. And now they're going to be faced with the idea of having to go out and find a job in the workplace at that age. And having their big job has been to take care of their veteran.
Which is serving the country.
Which is exactly that. It's a service unto itself and should be recognized as such. So I wanted that the zero property tax to extend onto the spouse as long as the spouse stays in the house and is single and not married. If you remarries, it's a different ballgame, I understand. That's what some of the cynics will say. But I do believe that we need to honor. I want Ohio to be that state that people say they take care of their veterans.
Do you think in general the reforms that were recently passed regarding property taxes and awaiting the signature of the governor, specifically the ones that tie the inside millage, the 10 mils inside millage and the 20 mil outside millage to the rate of inflation is a step in the right direction?
I do. I believe that we're, that the old expression, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. We're not going to fix this property tax conundrum in a single bill or even in a single General Assembly.
And you didn't do that with income taxes either.
No. After that, when I went to Columbus, we had 9 tax brackets. The top one was at over 9%. And until this year, we had just 2. We got rid of 7 of the tax brackets. We lowered them down, 325, 275. And under the leadership of President McCauley, we were able to erase the 325, make it a flat tax of 275. We're the only state in the Midwest that offers that flat tax. And this is, again, what makes the engine run is the gasoline. What makes the state run is jobs. And we want to do everything we can to encourage companies to come here, to move here. And we have so much to offer. I mean, granted, I'm spoiled because I'm in Cuyahoga County. I grew up, 5 minutes from Lake Erie, and then we have the metro parks. We have the finest hospitals, in the country. Actually, with the Cleveland Clinic and university hospitals, they share the same zip code, and they both are excellent hospitals and culture, arts and culture. We've been able to, create an arts and culture fund that's been able to fund. And, you need to be able to keep a world-class orchestra like the Cleveland, which is perceived by many as the finest orchestra in the world, if not one of the top 2 or 3 in Cleveland, Ohio. When they travel, Austria, Germany, they travel to Florida regularly every year. They pack the houses. And we should be proud about that. And most people will know the Cleveland Clinic just by calling it Cleveland in Dubai or in London and things like. But we have them, 9500 Euclid Avenue, right here in Cleveland. So I think we want companies to take a look at all these things, especially in my area, Northeast Ohio. But we want to make sure that people understand that Ohio does more things on accident than other states try to do on purpose. We're such a good state.
Right. I think it's also very interesting that since the 10 years that I've been around, when it went from 9 down to the current 2 and soon to be 1 income tax bracket, the other side of the aisle talked about, we'll never be able to fund the state budget and all these programs. Yet, isn't it interesting how we continue to end up with a budget surplus? Because lowering the overall state income tax burden does generate economic development.
Absolutely. It goes hand in hand. It does. And again, fiscal restraint is always something that, just because it's, if someone gets a state grant, they don't say, well, you helped us get it. No, I said, the state gave you the grant. I may have been the processor,
right?
But it's something that we always have to strive to do exactly what we've been doing. Look where we can cut, look what programs, look at how many programs that we eliminated that had tax, credits. We got rid of a whole bunch of tax credits this year because you took a look back and said, let's re-examine. Maybe when we did that in 1965, that might have been a good idea. It's not a good idea in 2020. It's not as necessary.
It's the difference between, as Senator Lang, your colleague, likes to say, do we have a spending problem or do we have a revenue problem? And he'll say, John, we have a spending problem, right? One of the, but you always want to make sure that tax credits and incentives equal revenue for the state, where you're just not wasting money, you're creating jobs. Cleveland is in a unique position, and if you haven't seen the movie, the new Superman movie, yes, right, was shot in Cleveland. And you and I believe Senator Timken sponsored Senate Bill 159. It's an expansion of the film tax credit. Tell us a little bit about that. And it seems like Hollywood loves Ohio. And of course, Senator Schuring, the late Senator Schuring, Kirk Schuring, was a huge advocate for expanding that film tax credit.
But not to put too fine a point on it, but in 2008, I created the first tax credit, film tax credit. That was my bill. And Ivan Schwartz was the Cleveland film director. He actually was one of the executive producers on Band of Brothers, that miniseries. And in scouting the locations, he kind of fell in love with Cleveland Heights as an area he wanted to raise his family in. And so he came to Cleveland. And then, at that time, there was about 25 other states that were offering tax credits. And so we did the first 2 years of tax credits. Cleveland State did a study, and they said for every $1 in tax credits, we were getting $1.33 in revenue. So we kind of bumped it up to 50. And again, it came back closer to $2 in revenue. But more importantly, folks, whenever they're doing films in Cleveland, I was invited to come to the film set, but they're always filming when I'm in Columbus. But I did go to Fast and Furious down there, and I watched them take like 10 takes on one scene. And I talked to a young man, not necessarily young, but he lived in Rocky River. He goes, I've been a cameraman for 10 years. He goes, but it's the first time I've got to wake up in my own bed and go to work. He said, and he goes, so keep up the good work. And, you're bringing more and more people come into Cleveland. And Cleveland, I'll tell you something, if our tax credit, Louisiana has an unlimited tax credit. And the states around us have now gotten bigger and better. They're up to 75 and Georgia, whatever. Yes. And, but, the folks, if in New York City, you need to get a street to do a scene, they give you 17 minutes. They'll give you from 6 o'clock to 6:47. You got to get this film shot, get on the first take and go. If you're shutting the street down in Cleveland, we shut the Shoreway down. The Cleveland Shoreway was shut down for 8 days while they're filming a movie here in Cleveland, which, the hotel rooms in Cleveland, Ohio are not going to compare to the hotel rooms in Chicago or New York. And the restaurants, which we have great restaurants in Ohio. And so the actors, the crews, they love coming here. And the people love going, they love to go to the sets, and they're not in the film, but they're watching. And I saw Kevin Costner at a restaurant last night, or I saw this actor there, and it's starstruck and whatever. And but more important than that, it's a tax credit that works. And we've proven it over and over again. And I think that with Senator Timken picking up the mantle for Senator Schering, and I had in the House in the previous General Assembly, we were doing a companion bill, so it made sense that she and I teamed up on this one, and I'm hoping that we're going to be successful because it's, again, not all tax credits are bad. A lot of tax credits, as you pointed out, are good for bringing business in and bringing revenue in, and I think that's what we need to continue to do.
One of your final bills, too, before we wrap it up, also dealt with a lot of people felt out there, I got pulled over and that officer has to write me a ticket because of a quota. Well, you had a bill that put that whole issue to rest. Tell me about it.
Yes. Again, growing up in a police family and surrounded by policemen a lot of my life, it's when policemen write a ticket, they write it because someone was egregiously at fault doing something wrong. But to come up with an artificial quota, you have to run 10 tickets a night, and now you got a half hour to go on your shift and you're 4 tickets short. So now you go to a stop sign, it's at 10:30 at night, 11:30 at night, everybody rolls a stop sign, but that's 4 quick, cheap tickets so your captain, your chief doesn't get mad at you. And there wasn't a whole lot of people doing it, but there was enough that the Fraternal Order Police came to me and all the other police organizations supported it. And they said, and again, the issue I want the public to know is that if you speed, you're going to get a ticket, and you should. But we don't want people writing tickets because there's a certain number that's been created that somebody has to write and create. I was delighted that in a bipartisan way, we got a unanimous vote in the House and Senate on it. And it's, everybody believes in that if you're driving, and you need to get pulled over, get a ticket, you're going to get a ticket. But if you're going 3 miles an hour over the speed limit, and most people, policemen, they're like anybody else. They have a heart. They have to live paycheck to paycheck. So they're not going to hit somebody with a $175 ticket. They'd rather give them a warning. They have discretion, and you want to offer them that discretion. But I just think that the conception in a whole lot of people's minds was that they've always had quotas. Sure. And I know that's for a fact that wasn't true. But this will eliminate. And further, if somebody tries to abuse it, all right, that same officer can quietly, confidentially contact the Attorney General, who will step in and enforce this law and then punish the city administrator, the chief, or whoever going away from this particular law. So the law is there cannot be a quota.
Yep. Senate Bill 114 was what that was. And really, law enforcement is there to protect and serve. They're brave men and women that do that. They're not there as a revenue enhancer or to generate revenue.
That shouldn't be their job.
That's not their primary job.
That shouldn't be.
Senator Tom Patton, Republican from the 24th District in Strongsville, Ohio. Thanks for your perspective, insight. Always great to talk to you.
Always great. Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.